I met Corey when he was first starting out changing his profession, right? So from chef and photographer to photographer and human condition expert. So Corey is the creator of Hearts of Strangers, which I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit about. I'll let him explain it. He has a very eloquent way of explaining this organization and this project. And Corey came to us a few years ago when we had a program here on campus called the Fresh Check program. He came and met with us that day, and he just walked around with his camera and connected with students, and we're asking students questions about their life and what they were grateful for and what they loved about their life, and so it was just a great experience for our students, and they really connected with that project and with that experience, and from there things just started growing and sprouting, and Corey has done so much work in the community. He works now for Continuum of Care in New Haven, doing mind, body, spirit work with a lot of different people, many of whom suffer from mental illness and have other issues that they're suffering from, and helping them to reconnect with themselves, but really mainly also connecting with other people and finding a way to find meaning and purpose in life. And so we are super excited to have Corey here. Thank you so much, and let's give a round of warm welcome to Corey.
My ex, I happened to be in contact with that same night that I was in that space, and he came to my aid against my will, and he did probably all the things that he was supposed to do. You know, he recognized that there wasn't any food in my refrigerator. He offered to feed me. He got me on the phone with a hotline, and I think when I was in that space, like I didn't respond to the hotline. I remember her encouraging me to take a hot bath, to watch my favorite movie, things of that nature. I called my therapist, and she said, you know, if things continue to escalate, you need to take yourself to the emergency room. And so things sort of died down that night. He ended up spending the night, and by the next morning, things had ramped back up to where they were and escalated even further. And he ended up calling the police, and I'm grateful that he did, because when the police knocked on the door and I had to answer it, and they asked me, you know, if I was okay, and I said no, and they said, you know, do you want to hurt yourself? I said yes, and I just broke down crying, and it was in those same clothes that I was in that video that I spent the next 10 days at Yale Psychiatric Hospital, schlepping around in my socks in the psychiatric ward. And the first 3 days that I was there, I did nothing but cry and feel ashamed of myself and feel guilty and feel sort of this feeling of humiliation and sorrow. But something happened on the third day. There was another patient that came in that same condition that I had been in, sort of hysterical and feeling humiliated and ashamed and guilty. And my innate response was to comfort her and to reach out and to let her know that she wasn't alone. And I saw that I wasn't the only one that had that response. There was a handful of other people on that ward, and so we began to connect with each other through the experiences that was causing us shame and pain, and talking about those things, and not judging each other. You know, it was a safe place. There was no judgment. It didn't matter what somebody did outside of that psych ward, how much money they had. I remember a woman, Carolyn, she had come from Cheshire. She had a $350,000 house that she had almost burnt to the ground, trying to asphyxiate herself. And when that wasn't working, she threw gasoline in the garage and lit a match before she remembered that her husband was in the house. And you know, she was stricken with grief. And so I realized very quickly that it didn't matter how much money we had. It didn't matter what sort of family we had. It didn't matter what our jobs were, what color our skin was, how old we were, how short we were, how how tall we were, how fat or thin we were, that these were human experiences, that we're all going to experience suffering at some point in our life. That's part of the deal of being human, and that we're not equipped. We're not equipped. We don't have the skills to deal with that, and so that's what I began to learn while I was in there. In addition to connecting with people, was learning some skills, and it came to taking care of myself, learning how to love myself. 10 days later, I get out of the hospital. I've got 10 days of sobriety at this point, and I'm happy to say now, I'm coming up on 3 years, smoke-free, drug-free, alcohol-free, no medication, and I also don't eat meat. I'm vegetarian. I'm not suggesting that you stop eating meat or don't take medication, but for me, it feels like a wonderful space to be in, because I think a lot of times we think, that there's a very specific way that we can recover and heal, and that it looks the same for everybody. But I found my own path, and it wasn't through a 12-step program, it wasn't through AA, it was through connection. And I found connection through my photography. Courage is another thing that is the antidote for shame, guilt, and fear. And courage, I think sometimes we think of courage as being sort of violent or aggressive. That's not what courage means to me, and that's not what I found courage to be. I think courage is a willingness to show up despite our fears, to show up to this moment, whatever that moment is, despite being uncomfortable. That to me is courage. Courage to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is probably the most courageous space to live in and to operate from. So vulnerability is another antidote to shame, fear, and guilt. Allowing ourselves to remain open, even though we've been hurt or disappointed. How many of you have had a response where you've been hurt or disappointed by somebody, and you feel like, you know what, I'm going to be tough, I'm going to totally, build that wall up, I'm going to be, industrial strength, and no one's ever going to hurt me again. I think we probably all have that response at some time, like, F them, I'm going to be impenetrable, and nothing's ever going to break me, nothing's ever going to hurt me. But what happens when we do that is, we may think that we're preventing ourselves from being hurt again, but we're closing ourselves off from connection, from love, from all the things that the world has to offer us by living in that bubble, that comfort zone where we feel safe and protected, where nothing can get in and maybe nothing can get out. There's no way to sort of siphon out the bad stuff, the stuff that's going to hurt us, without also blocking out the beautiful things, the things that are going to help us grow and develop and experience the abundance of joy and gratitude and beauty that the world has to offer.
So first, I would just like to say thank you, because I think that you bring such an amazing perspective to suffering that a lot of people don't think about. And I think we were talking a little bit earlier about, we think that somehow we should be able to walk through life without any suffering at all. That somehow if we're suffering or if something's wrong or if we can't do something, then there's actually something wrong with us, that we're failing at life. And so we try to avoid that failure, or we try to avoid what we're suffering from. And so I guess I just wanted to ask you, in your process, like in your healing process, at what point did you know that you had kind of shifted towards more healing than suffering, or more connection and more light than darkness? And how did you know that, and what did it feel like at that point for you?
Sure. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think for me, when I got out of the hospital, I started going back to yoga. I started going back to meditation. I started eating better, and I started engaging with some social activities and being around people and doing the writing and the photography. I think for me, when I really felt the shift that not only am I healing, but I'm giving an opportunity for others to heal as well, was that feeling that I got when I was present with somebody, and when there was I had no previous knowledge of their experience or who they were, but just being, I felt plugged in to a higher source. I felt completely alive, like anything could happen in that moment. They had my complete attention and eye contact, and I saw them coming to life in that space, and I felt myself coming to life in that space, and I just wanted more and more of that. And I think I never in all of my life really did well in large groups and small talk. I was always sort of focused on heart-to-heart conversations and meaningful conversations where you walked away feeling like you had created more space or some more awareness or some sense of perspective or a deeper connection with the person that you had shared with. And so I think I really realized that I can have those heart-to-heart conversations every day. That can be the way that I lead my life. And I can make a choice to do that by being the example of what that looks like. And so that is the place that I operate from. And I don't have a second thought about it. I don't even question it anymore. I just do it, which I think is why it's surprising sometimes when people respond to me the way that they do, because I don't think of myself as like an advocate or a champion for anything. I just think, somebody out there is going to be touched or inspired by where I've been, and I'm more concerned in learning about where they've been, because I've learned more in the 3 years that I've sat and been present with people and asked questions out of curiosity rather than judgment about myself and about life, about being human. The shirts that I'm wearing one, Natalie's wearing one, Erica's wearing one in the back. It's a little chilly in here, so some people have covered up. But these shirts, and I didn't intend for them to serve as this tool, but they actually work in creating conversations, positive dialogue between strangers, and they're available. The reason I created the shirts is because I wanted to raise awareness for the project, and when I was thinking about, what's the message here, I thought, what's the first message that I'm sending to a person who I'm asking to photograph? That I see something beautiful in them. And I think we don't get that message enough. We actually get the opposite message all the time from media, that we're not enough, that we're not beautiful, that we need to buy this to be beautiful or do that to be beautiful. So I thought that was the first message, and then of course your story will inspire others. But these shirts create conversation. I also find that just by being yourself in any situation can inspire somebody, and maybe you don't have an interaction with them that day. And this is a perfect example of that. It was just last week, or maybe the week prior, I met with Natalie at Starbucks in Hamden to interview her. And during that interview, there was a gentleman sitting across from us with a Seattle coffee cup mug, and I asked him about it, and I thought that's really unique. Like, who brings their own coffee mug, aside from like a travel cup, into a Starbucks? And so it created a conversation about that, and that sort of broke the ice. And he was actually sitting across from us where we were doing the interview, and he was overhearing the level, sort of the level that we were, the topics that we were talking about. We were getting right to the nitty-gritty stuff. He ended up moving his seat once another seat became available, I think, as he was trying to do homework. After Natalie left and we finished up her interview, another woman who then sat across from me asked me about the shirt. And so I told her what it represents, and that started a conversation about her being a cancer survivor and her going to Yale, and she's studying sociology and all this stuff. And she was in tears at one point when I talked about what I was doing. And I later showed her the Kickstarter video that I showed you guys. I just felt like it was one of those moments where we were supposed to align with each other and connect in that way. And that gentleman with the Seattle coffee mug, less than a week later, contacted me on Google through like Google Chat, and it was inspired by our conversation. And so you never know what seeds you're planting, or when they're going to sort of break the surface and grow, but plant them everywhere. If I could be frank, sprinkle that shit everywhere. Plant seeds, yes, because it matters. You know, you may be just going about your business, being who you are, being friendly, being genuine, and that could inspire somebody who has seen your actions, and then they hold the door open for somebody else, or then they are more gentle or more compassionate or loving to somebody else. You could change not only someone's mood or that moment in their day, but you could change the course of their life just by being who you are. We all have incredible strength. I think, you know, one of the things that I ask people a lot in the interviews is what have you learned about yourself? And usually the response is that I'm stronger than I thought I was. Ernestine, you were an example of that, as many others were. And I think that we don't give ourselves credit. You know, we think that we're somehow damaged goods, or you know that we're once we're broken, that we can't ever be repaired or function again. But these stories within Hearts of Strangers are not just about what's the most challenging thing that you've experienced and how did your life crumble from that, but how did you rebuild? Because that is what I'm fascinated by. You know, this ability to get up and to keep going despite the storms that come and sort of strip away the structure, you know, to come to that foundation and to rebuild. And you know, I think that we also all have each other. We're not alone. And I learned through being hospitalized never to be ashamed to ask for help. And it's so hard. You know, I think that our ego gets in the way. We think we're supposed to be able to do everything on our own. We're supposed to be self-sufficient and not need anyone, and to be able to overcome every obstacle in our life. But I don't think anyone, including Oprah, who many of us look up to, she didn't get to where she is by herself. None of us do. Think about all the many people that have come and gone in your life, or remained there throughout the years, that have helped you and supported you and loved you and encouraged you. And hopefully, somewhere in there, you've been that person to yourself too. And if you haven't, I hope you get to that place, because it's important. The only person that's going to be with us for the rest of our lives is us. You know, we have to live with ourselves, no matter who else comes and goes in our lives. There's no escaping that. So it's important to make peace with ourselves. You know, I was in a situation when I started this project where I was in a very toxic living situation with someone who was very critical of me and very judgmental and continued to try to cut me down the more I healed and the further I went in the direction of my path. And it was very hard for me to tune that out and to sort of remove myself from that, but I had to for my own survival. And I started to rely on people who were willing to sort of practice authenticity and move in the same space that I was. And I realized, through compassion for this guy that I was living with, that the way that he was treating me was just an outpicturing of the way he was treating himself, that he was criticizing himself and bullying himself, and that was probably his tape from his childhood of his father or whoever saying those things to him. And so I knew it wasn't really about me, it was about him. And that helped me sort of let that go. But it's really important to surround yourself with people who will be there for you when you're down here and when you're up there. There was that woman that I connected with in Starbucks after your interview. She shared with me something really tragic. She was walking around the Yale campus with a friend of hers after having coffee or dinner or something, and she saw a group of students centered, sort of circled around something, and she got closer to see what it was, to see what was going on, and it was a young man face down in the ivy in Old Campus, and there was an open window, a couple stories above, and the other students who were sort of circled around him were like paralyzed. They weren't doing anything. They didn't know what to do. I think they were in shock. And she shared with me what she did. She sort of got down to his level and started, very calmly talking to him and trying to ask him questions and keep his engagement. And at one point, she said she took off her scarf and she put it under his head to offer some comfort. It was cold outside, and she asked if there was anyone that he wanted her to call, aside from the ambulance, because the ambulance was on its way at that point. And he said no, and tears are streaming down her face, tears are streaming down my face. And she shared with me that, that's what she was afraid of, that there was sort of no support, that there was no one that he felt comfortable that he could talk to about what he was feeling. So he was hospitalized, and Yale kept it very quiet, as they do with things like this, but he had attempted suicide. And I guess, his parents were not compassionate and not, loving, and were, judgmental, and he didn't feel that sense of support that he needed, and it wasn't too much longer after that he was successful in another attempt to complete suicide. And it's just a heartbreaking story. But, what I took away from that was, in that moment, she could have been one of those bystanders, just sort of hovering, looking down, or she could have not even stopped. She could have, this is my day, I'm in my space, I'm with my friend, and, not even done anything. But she got down on the ground, and she sort of was like, what can I do? And I think if we all approach life in that way, because it's very easy to point out a million problems with the environment or with the world or society or whatever. But if we asked ourselves instead, what can I do? What can I do to make it better? Because we all have the power. I think that sometimes we wait for some external thing like a leader or the government to change society. I think it starts right here. It starts right there. It starts with us. We have to be that change and to ask ourselves, what can I do? And so in that situation, you see someone struggling, I would say, ask yourself, what can I do? What do you feel comfortable doing? I'm not a therapist, and I don't claim to be, and I would never offer somebody, that I'm going to fix their problems or to be able to counsel them. But I do know what I am capable of, and that is I'm capable of being present. I'm capable of listening empathetically, without judgment, and I'm definitely going to hug you when you're done sharing with me, and maybe we'll dance, and find that that's enough,